TV shows aren't always what they seem. Behind the laughter, drama, and glamour lie stories so dark they'll haunt you forever. A courtroom bailiff turned criminal, a game show prank gone tragically wrong, and a fiery clash caught on live TV. These shocking true stories will make you see your favorite shows in a whole new light. Trust me, you won't believe what really happened behind the scenes. Daytime television, a world dominated by infomercials, soap operas, and carefully curated legal dramas, had its share of memorable moments. Among the standout programs of the time was Christina's Court, hosted by Cristina Perez. The show offered counsel and rulings on legal disputes, attracting a dedicated audience. On one particular episode, comedian Sean Harris appeared to bring a case against his former partner, seeking unpaid rent. While these shows often leaned into dramatization, Sean's comedic background made this episode a standout, brimming with humor and spontaneity. The most unforgettable moment came near the episode's conclusion, breaking away from the typical script. Sean directed a playful jab at Renard Spivey, the show's longtime bailiff and a familiar face to viewers. Renard had always been a pillar of the courtroom's dynamic, but Sean's joke about his 27-year marriage painted a surprisingly amusing picture, suggesting Renard wasn't thrilled with his marital status. The lighthearted exchange delighted the audience, leaving a lasting impression. However, the irony behind this seemingly innocent joke would take on a chilling significance years later. Fast forward to July 28, 2019, when Renard Spivey, now a 63-year-old deputy with the Harris County Sheriff's Office, faced an unthinkable accusation: the demise of his wife, Patricia Spivey, aged 52. Reports indicated that a heated argument between the couple spiraled out of control, allegedly sparked by Patricia's suspicions of steroid use or infidelity. In a tragic turn, the confrontation escalated, resulting in Patricia being fired twice, once in the arm and once fatally in the chest. Her body was later discovered in the couple's bedroom closet. For Renard, once a fixture on a celebrated legal show, life took a dark turn. Convicted for the crime, he now serves a 14-year prison sentence, a stark contrast to his television persona. The case turned an episode once cherished for its humor into one of the most haunting examples of irony in daytime TV history. Television often hides disturbing truths beneath its polished exterior. This story is just one of many unsettling moments that linger beneath the surface of the entertainment world. For years, I've been fascinated by these eerie tales, and this series aims to uncover some of the most chilling incidents to ever unfold on screen. Another lesser-known, yet deeply troubling, incident occurred on June 14, 2008, in Japan. Television Miyazaki was airing its usual live programming, including a competitive game segment filmed in the remote rice fields of Takachiho. The rules were straightforward. Participants stood back-to-back on a narrow wooden platform over muddy water, pushing against one another in an effort to knock their opponent into the muck below. The last person standing was declared the winner, while the unsuccessful person faced public embarrassment. The first round played out without issue, delivering the lively, chaotic charm typical of Japanese game shows. Contestants laughed and cheered as the defeated competitor fell, covered in thick brown sludge. The crowd's energy peaked when one of the hosts, Tatsuchi Yanagida, was persuaded to join the fun. After some persuasion, Tatsuchi Yanagida agreed to participate, much to the delight of the spectators. The humor practically wrote itself as it became clear from the outset that he was outmatched. Losing his balance immediately, Tatsuchi made a split-second decision to leap from the platform. Unfortunately, he landed headfirst into the shallow, muddy water, which was only 6 inches deep. Beneath the water, a dense layer of mud broke his fall, but not in the way one would hope. His head struck the thick mud with full force, snapping his neck and leaving him instantly paralyzed from the neck down. What followed was a heart-wrenching and deeply troubling sequence. Unaware of Tatsuchi's severe injury, the crew and participants assumed he was joking. They laughed and played along, pushing his head deeper into the muddy water to mock his loss. Oblivious to his desperate fight for survival, they splashed more mud onto him, trapping his face underwater. As seconds ticked by, Tatsuchi was slowly drowning, completely incapable of lifting his head to breathe. After an excruciating 15 seconds, they briefly lifted his head above the water, only to dunk him back down again amidst uproarious laughter. The disconnect between the light-hearted hysteria and Tatsuchi's situation was painful to watch. Finally, someone hoisted him out of the mud, and the broadcast cut back to the main program. By sheer luck, Tatsuchi survived the ordeal. However, doctors later confirmed that even a few more seconds in that position could have been fatal. Tatsuchi's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Despite living with total paralysis, he found a way to adapt and even rejoined the show in some capacity years later. Though his survival adds a glimmer of hope to the story, it remains one of the most harrowing live broadcast accidents ever recorded. Another story that left an indelible mark on me aired on 60 Minutes and revolved around firefighter Donald Herbert. The events began on December 29, 1995, when Herbert responded to a house fire in Buffalo, New York. While battling the blaze, he stood on the roof, which unexpectedly gave way beneath him. Herbert fell into the attic, where thick smoke engulfed him, cutting off his oxygen supply for a full 6 minutes. By the time rescuers reached him, he was unconscious, barely clinging to life. Although Herbert survived, the prolonged oxygen deprivation caused extensive brain damage. For years, he remained in a minimally conscious state, unable to eat, speak, or understand his surroundings. Confined to a nursing home and dependent on a feeding tube, his condition seemed irreversible. His family was devastated, holding on to hope against all odds. Then, on April 20th, 2005, nearly a decade after his accident, something extraordinary happened. Herbert unexpectedly regained consciousness. In a moment that stunned everyone, he turned to a nurse and asked for his wife, Linda. His lucidity astonished the medical staff, prompting them to call his family immediately. When they arrived, Herbert recognized his loved ones despite being completely blind. Cameras captured the emotional reunion, later airing on 60 Minutes in a segment that remains one of the most moving pieces of television I've ever witnessed. For the next 16 hours, Herbert conversed with his family, catching up on years of missed milestones. Though his lucidity fluctuated in the days that followed, there was cautious optimism about his recovery. His family rallied around him, cherishing every moment while also ensuring his safety. Herbert's newfound consciousness, however, came with disturbing side effects. At night, he would thrash violently, seemingly reliving the fire that had nearly claimed his life. To prevent injury, a family member always stayed by his side while he slept. One night, exhaustion got the better of his caregiver, and Herbert was left alone for the first time since his awakening. Tragically, during one of his episodes, he fell from his bed. The impact caused a brain hemorrhage, and Herbert's fragile recovery came to a devastating end. From that point onward, Donald Herbert never regained full lucidity. Tragically, the injuries he sustained contributed to his passing just a year later, due to complications from pneumonia. While his story remains a heartbreaking reminder of resilience cut short, it underscores the profound emotional weight certain television broadcasts carry. Shifting focus to another narrative tied to the screen, let's explore a chilling episode involving the movie adaptation of the famed Twilight Zone series. Titled Twilight Zone, the film was structured as an anthology with multiple segments, each telling a standalone story. One particular scene, meant to conclude one of the sections with dramatic flair, instead became infamous for a catastrophic tragedy on set. This sequence was set during the Vietnam War, featuring actor Vic Morrow as the lead character. The storyline depicted him fleeing a relentless harm helicopter while trying to rescue 2 young Vietnamese children. The climactic moment involved Morrow's character shielding the children as explosions tore through a deserted village, with the trio narrowly escaping under the hovering helicopter. Filming this scene was inherently risky, as the director, John Landis, insisted on using practical effects for authenticity. The production incorporated real explosions and an actual helicopter, raising significant safety concerns. To complicate matters further, Landis chose to cast 2 real children, 7-year-old Micah Din-Lu and 6-year-old Renee Shin-Chun. Despite California laws prohibiting minors from working in such hazardous conditions at night, Ignoring these regulations, the team pushed forward. As filming began, the intensity of the scene was palpable. Explosions illuminated the night sky, creating a chaotic, warlike atmosphere. However, the effects team made a fateful decision to amplify the spectacle by detonating two massive charges in quick succession. The resulting blasts destabilized the helicopter, causing it to spin uncontrollably. Within moments, the aircraft plummeted toward the actors waiting through shallow water below. What followed was a horrifying disaster. The helicopter's spinning blades touched Vic Morrow and Micah Din Liu, eliminating them instantly. Renee Shin Chun was crushed under the helicopter's fuselage upon impact. Remarkably, everyone aboard the helicopter survived the crash, but the tragedy eliminated the three actors on the ground. In hindsight, the dangerous shortcuts taken during production were glaring. Yet, after extensive legal battles, no one was held accountable for the deaths. John Landis, despite his role in the tragedy, continued to enjoy a thriving career in Hollywood. The film was eventually released with an altered ending, but the shadow of that night lingers as one of the darkest moments in cinema history. Our final tale takes us to the tranquil countryside of Buttsfield, England, where Elbert Dryden lived a quiet and solitary life. After retiring from his career as a steelworker, Elbert set out to develop a plot of land he had purchased. His vision included building a summer bungalow for his elderly mother and a fallout shelter on the same property. However, these plans soon ran afoul of local regulations. When Elbert applied for permits, his requests were promptly denied. Determined to proceed, he devised a workaround. Instead of constructing a traditional home, he dug a large pit and began building what he called a home in a hole. The partially underground design left only about 8 feet of the structure visible above ground, which Elbert believed exempted it from standard building laws. Unfortunately, his interpretation was incorrect, and his unpermitted construction sparked a growing conflict with the Derwentside District Council. The dispute escalated when Harry Collinson, the newly appointed council chief, took on the case as one of his first assignments. Collinson sent Elbert a formal notice demanding an immediate halt to construction and the demolition of what had already been built. Undeterred, Elbert filed a court appeal to contest the order. However, the court sided with the council, giving Elbert a 3-month deadline to tear down the structure. Around this time, the ongoing conflict between Elbert Dryden and local authorities began to attract media attention. Despite numerous rulings against him, Dryden steadfastly refused to comply with the government's demands. Frustrated by his defiance, the council decided to take direct action, planning to demolish the illegal structure themselves. On June 20th, 1991, Harry Collinson, the chief planning officer, arrived at Dryden's property with a demolition crew and police officers in tow. Anticipating potential resistance, the team had instructions to retreat if Dryden escalated the situation. The goal was to avoid confrontation at all costs. As the group approached, reporters and cameramen, including one from the BBC, gathered at the property to document the events. Dryden had chain-locked the gate to his land and stood behind it, clutching 2 letters that he claimed supported his case. Speaking loudly, he insisted that these documents proved he had an appeal pending, which should delay any demolition efforts. However, Collinson dismissed these arguments, asserting that no legal grounds remained to halt the process. Dryden's frustration grew with every passing moment. His tone shifted from pleading to increasingly menacing as Collinson reiterated that the demolition would proceed. Dryden warned them to leave, his words laced with thinly veiled words. Still, the council team remained on site, preparing to carry out their task. The situation took a grave turn when Dryden retrieved a fire weapon, brandishing it openly. As tensions escalated, Collinson, determined to document the moment, instructed the cameraman to capture the weapon on film. What happened next unfolded in mere seconds but would leave an indelible mark on history. With cameras rolling, Dryden raised the firearm and fired directly into Collinson's chest. Chaos erupted as Dryden fired additional shots at the crowd, sending people scattering in terror. The BBC cameraman managed to retreat to safety, capturing the aftermath from a distance. It soon became clear that Collinson had succumbed to his injuries, lying motionless where he had fallen. Other shots struck a BBC journalist in the arm and grazed a police officer, further amplifying the panic. After the incidents, Dryden barricaded himself on his property, claiming to have rigged it with booby traps and explosives. Police initiated a tense standoff, wary of further panic. However, these claims turned out to be bluffs, and law enforcement eventually subdued Dryden without further incident. He was arrested and later sentenced to life in prison for his actions. Despite the tragedy, Dryden's defiance against the government garnered him a strange kind of notoriety. He developed a small but fervent fan base who viewed him as a symbol of resistance. Dryden remained in prison until 2017, when he suffered a debilitating stroke. Granted compassionate release, he spent his final months in freedom before passing away in 2018. The events of that day, captured in harrowing detail, remain one of the darkest and most shocking moments in television history, a grim reminder of how quickly conflicts can spiral into violence. Daytime television has its secrets, but these stories take the cake. Dark twists, tragic endings, and eerie coincidences that'll keep you up at night. What did you think of these shocking tales? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, because the next story we're uncovering is even more jaw-dropping.